All right, so chapter 10 is the business cycle. And in this chapter, we'll start to talk about some macroeconomics issue. Anyone remember the Great Depression?
Yes.
Anyone know what's the Great Depression? The Great Depression, it was some sort of a springboard for modern macroeconomics. And the Great Depression was back in the 1920s. And what happened is that there was like a big crash in the stock market, and the economy of the U.S. went, upside down, and the whole world also started to go and crash. And and then I started to look at why the economy as a whole crashed. What are the things that influences the economy at a macro level? So they started to look into the idea of prices increase. They started to look into what it means that all the people become unemployed. They started to see why companies fail. So a company, they're doing business, and then suddenly they fail. So why they fail? So it kind of opened up this field of macroeconomics. And today, if you look at, let's say, Yemen now, given the war and what's going on, there's a lot of macroeconomic issues that influences the entire economy. So here we're trying to look at this macroeconomics, and it's the study of this aggregate economic behavior, how the whole economy as a whole behave. And it says here aggregate economic behavior, or the economy as a whole. Now, macroeconomics is a basic purpose of macroeconomics theory is to explain this business cycle. Do you know what's a business cycle? That's today's chapter. So we will see the business cycle. Basically, the business cycle says that, there's some times where we're doing great, and the economy is growing, and then and then there's times where economy is going down, and it keeps going up and down. And this is the cycle. This is the business cycle. And for managers, we need to consider if the economy is going up, then what do you need to do? Maybe you want to produce more, you want to recruit, maybe you want to increase your inventory. On the other hand, if the economy is slowing, then what do? Maybe you don't want to do a lot of recruitment, maybe you don't want to have high inventory, maybe you want to keep your costs low. Macro policy, you don't want to do a lot of investments. The economy is going down, so you don't invest at this time, so because it's going down. Macro policy ties to control the business cycle. So here, what do we mean by policy? Policy means like government interventions, government decisions. For example, government decides to increase money supply, reduce money supply. Remember when we talked about fiscal policy and monetary policy? Remember monetary policy was where? In the Central Bank of Yemen, in the CBY. And then we've got the idea of a fiscal policy, which is the Ministry of Finance. Remember, we had the map. We had Kulliyat al-Shurta in the middle. And so these are the topics. Now, assessing macro performance, there are three basic measurements of macro performance. So how do we see how is the total economy is doing? We look at the output to GDP growth. So the idea here is from one year to another year, from maybe one quarter to another quarter, from month to a month, is the total GDP growing or not? Now, what is GDP? GDP is the gross domestic product. And the gross domestic product means if I take this economy, and let's say I will try to use an example. If you are like the big boss of a small tribe in some small village, okay, how do you determine if your village is growing or it's shrinking? You will basically take all of the people, all the population inside your small village or a whole country, and you see what do they do and how much money they make. And you sum up all of the money made, like you take all of the salaries of all the people, and you take the traders, all of the revenues and all of their income. And this will be like a big number. For Yemen, it's like $3 trillion. 3 trillion riyal. And you take that number, and then it kind of gives you an idea of how much total production. Now, if you are like the big boss of a small village, can you do this? Let's say if you have in your village 150 people. Can you take every one person how much money you made throughout the year? you sum them up and you get the GDP. It's not easy because you need to ask everyone in the economy. So here, macroeconomics data sometimes not very easy to obtain. And in some small world country, third world, you go and you ask them, where did you get the numbers? There is some employee in Yemen statistical organization, or their job to write these numbers. Sometimes they guess them up. Sometimes they say, okay, last year, so this year we grow 10%, so this is the number. You see, so we've got also some of these, like the data is not always accurate. But the objective is, if you're the big boss of this small village and there are 1 to 50 people, and you ask every one of them, you write them down, you get your GDP. Now you take this GDP this month, next month, then you see, are you growing or are you shrinking? Do you see? So that's the idea of GDP and its growth. Now, if you take Yemen, do you think, how does the government normally collect this data? One of the sources is, everyone who gets salary, they have to pay tax. So in the tax authority, they should be able to have all of people's salaries. And then, every trader who imports from outside Yemen, they have to pay tariff for customs. So they also have that information. Every business, they have to pay corporate taxes. So from the corporate taxes, you should be able to get that information. Now, of course, there are some jobs, and there are many jobs, that is not linked to the government numbers. So, for example, maybe GAT producers, even though GAT is now in Yemen, it's part of the local council taxes, because who's responsible to collect taxes on GAT is the local councils. You see, so Al-Majlis Al-Mahalli is responsible to collect taxes. So these people, they have income and they do it through QAT. So they decided to decentralize taxations on QAT. But you also have how many housewives, they provide work, but they're not actually paid. Or how many people, you have a gardener who works for you, you pay them cash. These people don't pay taxes. These people are not part of the official economy. Then, these are, we call them, they're outside the official economy. You see? So these people also are part of the economy. They create GDP growth, but maybe they're not recorded. Do you understand this idea of how we measure a full economy? We look at how people produce and how much. Then we see it over time. Is it growing or shrinking? What do you guys think these days? Is the economy is increasing, total GDP, or is it decreasing? If you compare it now, between now and, let's say, last month, or maybe now and last year, is it increasing or decreasing? How many people say, if you compare this time of the year, let's say the 2017 first quarter compared with last year first quarter of 2016. Now compared, are we increasing or are we decreasing? How many people say we're increasing? Okay. How many people say no, we're decreasing? We're less than we were last year. Wow, we've got more people. They think the economy is decreasing. Now, of course, you start to see, okay, last year there used to be some salaries. There's 1 million people in the government, they're paid by salaries, and now they are not. So this is total money less in the economy circulating. So here are some indicators of what is happening in the economy as a whole. We also look at the idea of unemployment. Now, another issue is how many people are employed. Now, do we want to have full employment? Remember when we talked about the PPF? Remember, the production frontier? We want all the people to be working, but sometimes we have unemployment. So we want to see how many people are unemployed. And of course, in governments, remember, if you're the big boss of the village of 150 people, you want to check, if you're the big boss, and you want to see how is your economy of your small village works, then you want to see the people. If you have 150 and they're all working, that's great. There are people that aren't doing anything. You want to get these people jobs. Because if they have jobs, they work, they add to the economy of the small village. Maybe they can grow more mangoes if you are in the farming business of mangoes. then these people, they grow, they work, they develop their industries, then the whole economy becomes better. And if the whole economy becomes better, people are happier, more employment and more growth. And then we've got the idea of inflation. Do you know what's inflation? Yes. Inflation is when prices starts to increase. And there's always this, in economics, what they do is they have this basket. Anyone have seen those small baskets? Does this look like a basket?
Online baskets.
This is a basket, a cart. This is like a shopping cart. Anyone have seen a shopping cart?
No.
Where do you see them? You go to the supermarket, you take this cart and you walk. Now, there is, in economics, they have this, there is someone's job in the organization for statistical. Their job is, and they have here some items. They have here tomatoes, okay? Maybe here chicken, maybe eggs, yogurt. They have a list of items that they think that most people in this economy buy. For example, the basket in Yemen, it includes khat, and basket in, I don't know where, it includes something else. Maybe if you go areas, they have a sushi. You see, maybe mulukhiyya is in the Egyptian basket. Now this basket, they take all of these items and they put the prices. And they put today's date. They put the prices and they get the price of all of these items. And they also set, 1 kilogram, 2 kilograms, 3 kilograms, depending on how much they think the average person in this economy consumes. And then they will take the price, and the price, let's say, will be 2,500. So they say the price for this basket is 2,500. And then every day they calculate the prices for the same items. And then they start to see is the price, they call this the CPI. Yeah, this is Consumer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index, it shows you the prices of this basket of items. And the idea or the objective is to continuously monitor our prices increasing or prices are decreasing. And this shows us the idea of inflation. Now, let's say, for example, if the total is 2,500, and then you go and you check last year, and the price last year was 2,000. Then you know that there's a 25% inflation. It means overall prices have increased from 2,000, now they are 2,500. So you know there is a 25% inflation. You see? Sometimes we have deflation. Now, if you take this basket and you check it and it's 2,500, let's say last period it was 2,000. Now, let's say you calculate it and it's 1,500. So here we have deflation. And we talked about this last class when we said that Japan had a deflation. In Japan, you look at their basket and you see the prices. They are, 2,000. Tomorrow you go, they are 1,900. Next day you see prices becoming cheaper and cheaper. So many people, they don't want to buy today. Because remember, in Japan, maybe people there buy, let's say if we buy computers. The economy buys a lot of computers. Many companies, they replace their computers. So in their basket, they have computers. And remember computers, if you remember like 20 years ago, you get this $2,500 computer and you need 5 for your business to work. Now, they are cheaper, you can get for $400 and your office doesn't need 5, you can do 2 and they will do the same job, you see. So the advancement in technology, advancements in production, health services, they become cheaper. You see, so as you have more cheaper, as your people become more productive, remember the village for 150 people. Now, in this 150 people, if they produce a lot of mangoes and the price of mangoes become very cheap, then we will start to have deflation. Now, sometimes we need to export, But sometimes economies, let's say big economies, the Japanese economy, they used to produce like cars very better and they export to the world and they become very cheaper and they're very competitive to the point where it becomes cheaper even though they are exporting all over. Do you see?
Why Japan is still quite expensive? I believe it's the most expensive place in the world.
Maybe that's another reason. It is very expensive. So if prices, if the price of coffee is $25 in Japan, you buy a cup of coffee, that's $25. That's like a normal price. Now, if the prices become $20, it becomes deflation. Do you see? Maybe that's another issue. Also has to do with finance. How the currency works with the other international currencies. So it has to do with the trade with other countries. So there are a lot of things that can influences what will make prices cheaper or more expensive.
What about if we link between deflation and surplus? Could we?
Remember that when we talked about surplus, we were talking about microeconomy, and we were talking about like one industry. We have surplus in some of these jobs, but maybe normally, if there is surplus of what?
Any goods.
Or any good, there is a surplus, so they become cheaper.
Yeah, and after that it will be like.
Yeah, maybe. Remember, in economics, you can put all of these together, then it becomes very complex. So what economists normally do is they normally do this radical simplification. So you want it to be very simple. And in order to make it simple, you only take one variable at a time, two variables at a time. But if you add more variables, it becomes very complex. And we also have ceteris paribus. All right. Now let's see. Next, we have here the discussion of GDP growth. And an economy potential output is reflected in its production possibilities curve. You guys remember the production possibilities curve? This is the production possibilities curve. Remember from last class? Military. What's on the other hand? Education. Now, of course, this is just an example. You can put anything. You can put here, arms and guns, and you can put here, apples and oranges. And what are the two things you want to produce? Qat and coffee, things like that. So here, the alternative combinations of goods and services that could be produced in a given time period with all available resources and technology. And then we talked about when there is a GDP growth and the production possibilities curve, what will happen? It will shift outward. This is how it will shift. So this is when you grow your total GDP. So the total production, all of your factors in labor and entrepreneurship can produce more, and that's when the PPF will expand outwards. Now this is the business cycle. That's a peak and that's a trough. Peak, trough, and this is maybe an economic trend. Maybe this is growth, or maybe if it's going down, will be the same thing. So whether you're growing or whether you are not growing, you will always have this cycle where there's times where it is going very to a peak and then goes to a trough at the bottom. Let's see, just to make sure you. So this is the peak and this is the trough, and this is how it continues to go. Business cycle is the alternating periods of economic growth and contractions experienced by an economy. And this shows the rise and fall of the economy over time. You guys are okay with this business cycle? Now, the modern business cycle will resemble a roller coaster. Do you know what's a roller coaster? Yeah, a roller coaster. Have you seen Al-If'awanah, they call it? Al-If'awaniyah, that's what they call it. You go to Fun City, you see those games where that's the roller cycle. I don't know, do they do that? Output first climb to a peak, a high, then it will decrease. And then after hitting a trough low, the economy will recover and it will increase back again. Now, here we have another topic called real GDP and the nominal GDP. In economics, you will hear the word real and nominal a lot. like GDP, real GDP, nominal GDP. Interest rates, real interest rates, nominal interest rates. What is the difference between real and nominal? Okay, now let's see. Real GDP, it is inflation adjusted. Do you understand what we mean by inflation adjusted? It means after we remove inflation. You see? Now some people say, for example, how much is tomatoes today? How much is the kilo of mango these days? 1,000 riyal. Now, is it more expensive than it was last year, or is it not very more expensive? Very expensive? Okay. Now, some people say, oh, you know what? Let's remove inflation. Maybe let's calculate it in dollars. Okay? 1,000 riyal today in dollars is $3. Now, $3 2 years ago, or let's say 3 years ago, $3 at the price of 215, that is 600. So did it really change, or is it the same? It's almost the same. It used to be 600. Do you see? So that's the idea of you adjust for inflation. So here we are adjusting for the Yemeni Riyal inflation. Then we need to adjust for the dollar inflation, because the dollar also inflates. So you go and you do the calculation against some third non-inflating currency, and you see. That's what we mean by real. Real, it means you remove the price increase or inflation. Okay? So that's a value of GDP, or the value of output measured in some constant prices. For example, this was like during Clinton. Clinton, he said, if you calculate my salary, was it Clinton or Obama? If you calculate how much is the salary, and after you adjust for inflation, you will find that the salary of George Washington, whoever created the U.S. salary, was more than how much they are paying today, even though they were paying like $1 million. So here it comes the idea of prices and inflation. You need to remove it, because remember, if the price is 100 today, and prices have increased, all prices in the market increased 20%. And now after 1 year, you still have 100. You lost $20 because all of the prices have increased 20. You see the idea of opportunity cost and the idea of inflation. The same thing for GDP. So if you calculate Yemen GDP now, maybe it will be more. Why? Maybe because the prices have increased. You see? This is erratic growth. Real GDP does not increase in consistent, smooth increments, but in patterns, steps, stumbles, and setbacks. So, growth is not always like very clear. It becomes like this shaky. And the Great Depression, this was the most prolonged departure from our long-term growth path. Even though you look at the real GDP, it fell 30% between this 1929 and 1933. So this kind of show you, when there is a drop and how much is the drop, and you look at it in real GDP. So if you look at, let's say maybe in the past 3 years, maybe it's almost like the Great Depression. Great Depression was for U.S. economy. Maybe the last 3 years have been Yemen's greatest depression for the 21st century. And here you look at this economy, how it started to grow again after, it took here like 5 years, more or less, to go back and pick up and starts to grow. And the total output starts to decline once again in the 36 to 37. And if you look at the economy, like in different countries over the periods, you see areas when there's like a big drop in the economy as a whole. Real GDP was virtually the same as in 29, and the GDP per capita. Now, what is GDP per capita? GDP per capita, it's basically how much the GDP divided by the population. Remember the village with the 150 people? So if you take all of their salaries and all of how much money they make, and you divide it by 150, you will get the GDP per capita. So that will give you an idea on how much every one person GDP. Do you know how much GDP in Yemen per capita? It was like $700 almost.
It includes the ones who are not producing, like kids and
Well, as I told you, there's a problem in the calculation. I told you at the beginning. There's a problem of calculation, but so they estimate. So that, and then they divide. You see? So World War II was greatly increased the demand for goods and services, and it ended the Great Depression. So sometimes war can be a solution for Great Depression, because in the Great Depression there was like very stagnant, and then in the U.S. economy in the World War II, that's when they started to export arms to Europe, and that was like an area where the baby boomers started. So that was an end of a Great Depression. Output grew by 20% or 19% in the 42, and the economy reached full employment. So here we start to see some recent recessions. Recession is a decline. Now what's a recession? Recession is a decline in the total output or real GDP for 2 or more consecutive quarters. So per definition, when do we have a recession? We have a recession if there are 2 quarters. Do you know how much is a quarter? A quarter is like 3 months. So every 6 months, and the economy is going down, and then that's when we call it a recession. And it is a slump or a downturn in the economy. Do you have any comments, or do you want to add anything? No? Okay. And then here we talked about this in the 81, 82, the 16 month was unemployment, 10%, highest since the 30s. So that's another recession in history. You know, this is another recession, a brief recession lasting 8 months. Expansion continued in the 2000. There is also in 2001, this was in March to November 2001 with a dot-com bubble. There's also the 2008, financial crisis. So all of these are examples of, recessions. And many of these recessions, they affect the whole world. Based on U.S. economy, because its size affects the whole world. Now, the idea of unemployment is the ability of labor force to participants to find jobs. Now, how do we know how much is unemployment? Now, some countries, they have there by law, if you're not employed, you have to go to some government office agency and you report that you don't have a job. And then some governments, they will try to find you a job. Some governments will give you training. Some will pay you Social Security. So depending on the country. So here, when output starts to decline, jobs become eliminated. Okay. So as you remember the 150 people in the small village, if the output is declining, then probably some people are not doing anything, because if they're doing something, the economy will be growing. So here we start to look at the labor force. The labor force consists of everyone over the age of 16. So this is by definition, okay, who is actually working, plus all of those who are not working but are actively seeking employment. You see? Now this definition can be sometimes a source of problem, because if people are not actively searching for jobs, they are not counted as unemployed. You see? So if you don't have a job and you're at home chewing qat and you are not interested to find a job, you are not part of unemployment. Do you see? Do you see? So here, this is like the definition of unemployment. So unemployment rate is the number of unemployed people divided by the size of the labor force. The labor force includes all of the people who are working or actively seeking to work. So proportional labor force is unemployed. Now, full employment goals. There are good reasons for pursuing low, but not a zero unemployment rate. Do we want to get zero unemployment rate? We can't reach it, right? Because there is what we call normal unemployment. Now, the normal unemployment includes type number 1, which is seasonal unemployment. And this is caused by seasonal changes. And what we mean by a seasonal change is when a school is out for summer, the teens are looking for jobs. You see? So this becomes, these people, they don't have jobs, they're looking for jobs, so they're part of the unemployment rate. But if they are in school and they are not looking for jobs, then they are not part of the unemployment. You see? So that's a season, maybe in the summer we see more unemployment than maybe in the winter. Now another type of unemployment is a brief period of unemployment associated with job search. The example, including students with marketable skills enter the workforce after graduation and workers in between jobs. So if you have a job and you're looking for another job, now when you're looking for a job, you're unemployment, and the reason is because you're changing your jobs. Okay? So that's what we call frictional. So it's a friction between industries. Okay? Now the third type is a structural. The structural, it's a mismatch. It's a mismatch between skill of labor force, participants, and the skills needed for employees. So let's say, for example, let's say the example here. For example, when the dot-com bubble or the bomb bursts, it was very difficult for programmers and software engineers to find jobs. And the same, see, in the 2001 bubble, it was a computer programming bubble. There was a lot of people programming. A lot of people studied programming in the 90s. And then it started to go, So, and then it started, all of these people, they went, and there was like a lot of companies for computers, and then there was like big bubble. And all of the computer sector dropped. And these programmers, they don't have jobs. So they go look for jobs. Same thing in the 2008. In the 2008, it was a financial bubble, right? So a lot of banks closed. Now, when these banks close, what happens to the people who work in these banks? You know, they're looking for jobs. Now, these people, or these examples show you that there's a structure. In the structure of the economy, people have to change jobs because the economy changed. You know, and you can see that here in Yemen during the war last 2 years. A lot of people, you know, in their jobs, the company closed. So now they're looking for other jobs. Do you see? And we start to see like these power companies. So if you're an electricity guy and you're like very good electrician and you work with the Ministry of Electricity and you used to go and cut lines and connect lines, and now they close, there's no more electricity by the government. Now they go find jobs with these new power companies that just started. So here we've got this unemployment, people changing jobs from one place to another. Are you guys okay with the structural?
Yes.
And then we've got another example is the skilled crafts and the housing contractors. Okay. And the fourth type is what we call a cyclical unemployment. When there are not enough jobs to go around due to downturn in the business cycle. So here we start to have unemployment just because of this recession. Like the Great Depression is the most shrinking example of a cyclical unemployment. So sometimes, let's say maybe here after war, there's not a lot of jobs. So because there's not a lot of jobs, then there is people unemployed. So this becomes like natural, just because of the cycle. Okay, there is a recession, so it is normal there will be people without jobs. Are you guys okay with these 5 types of normal unemployments? Let me ask you questions. If someone, some company decided that they don't want to have secretaries who do a lot of writings, and they decided, you know what, in every department there is no need for a secretary. These secretaries, we don't need you anymore because people, they can have computer skills, and these secretaries, they can go with no jobs. Now, this is an example of what? Maybe more structure. Okay. Now, if we say, at this time of the year, Ramadan is coming, and therefore some businesses we don't want seasonal. Good. And if we talk about, the economy is doing very bad, and we have to reduce some employees. Cyclical. You guys are amazing.
Is there a floor and ceiling for the ages of unemployment? So
There
for
is
example,
what?
If we need to do
Now hold on, we've got 3 people talking at the same time. We have someone here is talking, we've got someone there, Jalal is talking, and we've got here Layla talking. Go ahead.
I mean, if there is a floor and ceiling for the ages of unemployment, if we need to do a survey now, for example, in Yemen, what is the minimum age and the maximum age we can consider this guy is unemployed, so he will be part of
Well, according to the definition of unemployment, 16 and above, and you are actively seeking a job, and you cannot find the job, that's unemployment. And it
what
says
about the minimum,
there's no maximum.
Minimum age.
There's no 16 from 16 and above. You see,
And
if you are, let's say your age is 80 and you are actively looking for a job, then you are part of the unemployment.
okay.
You see, so that's according to the definition. Now, as I told you, we have a problem of doing the calculation, the numbers, and I said in some countries there is a bureau. Their job is to count these people exactly. Now, in some countries there is no one taking care of this responsibility. So if I ask how much is unemployment in Yemen, no one answers. The only people who will answer you, they will say, there's a report by the United Nations that the unemployment is 48%. How do they do this number? You know, they go and they do some proxy, some, they estimations, and, they do sample. So they will call, let's say, 1,000 people by phone in Yemen, or they send 1,000 surveys to Yemeni people, and they ask, are you looking for a job? Yes. Did you find a job? No. And then they count 1, 2. And then from the 1,000, they noticed that 40% of these people, were actively looking for jobs. But of course, there are some other issues with these estimations. Is because some people, when they say, they're asking if we have a job, you know what, let's say that we don't have jobs. So this is United Nations, they will tomorrow bring some money here. So do you see, so they go around the system. Remember that small sheikh with the small village, 150 people? You see, those people, they should be able, you have 150 people, you know how much. But when you see this form coming from United Nations, then you start to think in a what they call like marginal thinking. So you will go with the marginal cost. So if I say yes, then there is a chance. And if I say, you remember the oligopoly, the game theory, the cheating, so it starts to operate. So that's one of the issues with unemployment. Policy goals. Policy goals to avoid as much cyclical and structural unemployment as possible. So here, how can you avoid the cyclical? Now remember, cyclical, it becomes because of the recession. So here comes this idea of how can we make sure that we prevent these cyclical unemployments? How can we make jobs that are sustainable? How can we help businesses stay in business even though... Do we have anyone who works in the United Nations? So I know. So what departments you work in?
Admin finance.
In admin finance?
Protection.
In protection? Other? UNICEF, HR. Okay. So here we've got some of these, we've got some of these, how can we prevent the cyclical and also the structural? Because remember, the structural changes always happen like when the economy is growing. So you want the economy to grow. And every time you want to grow the economy, there will always be some structural unemployment. Do you guys remember مصنع الغزل والنسيج? Now, what is the biggest problem with that? It never worked. And if you see, the problem is like it's a two-dimension. We wanted to improve, and we need to invest, and we need to pay money to get some new machine and get new people to work so that we've got this great workers. And then we've got the people who are already there and we can't fire them. Do you see? So this becomes a structural unemployment. These people, we need to move to a new machine. It means you either need to learn the new skills or you're out. Do you see? One of the case studies that we had was like CAC Bank, like 10 years ago. Now CAC Bank, they decided, this is a government bank with like 2,000 employees. They have zero about new banking systems. So now, how can we make this CAC Bank to be highly tech? Now, how many people think CAC Bank is a high-tech bank? Anyone use CAC Mobile? You use CAC, it's an amazing, right? You can, you pay and your line is back. So this is like a high-tech service. So for the bank to move from zero technology to high-tech technology, that's a big structural change. And this structural change is going to cause a lot of unemployment, because you have to go to 2,000 people and say, hey, look, you either go get training, and that's going to be very expensive, and these people, they're not ready for training sometimes, and they hate change, and probably they will be unemployed when they put the new system. And now you want to go and find new people to join who are high-tech people. So here you've got this structural unemployment. So from a policy goal, how can you make those two work together? So it was like successful in CAC Bank, and it wasn't successful in Masna Ghazwa and Nasij. So here is, you go back to this idea of how you set your policies. You try to achieve full employment. That's the goal. Remember, like Obama, when he left, he said, you know what, I leave you today, with this, wonderful unemployment. And now the unemployment in the U.S. is dropping. So here becomes, this challenge for policy. Is Trump doing the great policy, or is it doing bad policy? Now, of course, if you see like last month, around last month, in end of February, the U.S. economy was at its peak. And if you look at the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 and all of the economic indicators, they were like top. They were like, people were very happy with Trump. But now, you see now in April, the indicator for unemployment dropped, the GDP dropped, the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 and most of the stocks are dropping. Last month in February, we joined LIU students on a financial market stock game. Do you guys want to participate? By definition, you qualify if you want to participate. LIU is running this financial markets competition. The competition will end after like 30 days. So you can join today if you want. If you are interested, send me an email. I'll send you the link. All LIU students, they go to this link, and it's a game. But this game, it's a financial markets game. Basically, you walk in, and with the link, it will give you the group, which is LIU group. And then you will get $100,000, and you can invest it in all of the companies available on the website. And it's not real money, it's just a virtual money. But if you buy a stock of Google, then it will tell you that you have the price of Google at its price, and it will monitor its price if it goes up or down. Now, after 30 days, it will end towards week 10 of the normal semester at the end of the summer. So it's before Eid, before Ramadan. LIU is going to announce the top 3 winners. And the first winner will get like $150, second winner $100, and the third winner will get $50. So the students who participated in the spring, they were all growing. The people who started in the summer, I just checked yesterday, they are all losing. We have only like 2 people who are not losing, and if you see these 2 people, they basically didn't invest in any stock. So this was like an interesting recent update in regarding to policy, idea of having an economy and full employment. Now, full employment is the lowest rate of unemployment compatible with this price stability. It's estimated to be 4 and 6. So they say 4 and 6 is what we call normal. Okay. Yeah. So you're full employed even though you have 6% unemployed. Now we move to the topic of inflation. Inflation is the biggest fear of an economy reaches full employment is inflation. Now, what happens if we have a full employment? Remember the sheikh with the 150 people in the small village? Now, if all the people are working and all the people that have income, then things are happy, right? But on the other hand, if all the people have income and all the people have good money, then people will start to compete for people. Like companies, they make a posting, I need someone to work for me. And all of you are working. Then who's going to join the job? The people with the lowest income will request higher income to join. Do you see? So if businesses are still working and all the people are working and we are full employment, then salary starts to increase. And as soon as salaries increase, what happens? Higher income, demand shift, prices increase. Remember? Now when prices increase, remember the basket becomes more expensive, inflation. So here we've got this problem between inflation and full employment. As soon as you reach full employment, you start to see inflation. To stop inflation, and so here we've got these economic indicators, they go together, and an economy will reach its production possibilities, the cost starts to rise, and this push up prices. Relative versus average prices. Inflation is an increase in the average level of prices, not a change in any specific price. So if I tell you inflation, it means the overall prices for the entire economy. Remember the basket? It's overall increase. Now, if, for example, here tomato prices increase and then yogurt prices decrease, maybe the total basket will be the same. Do you see? So it's not a specific price, rather an overall. Deflation is a decrease in the average level of prices of goods and services. And the relative prices is the price of one good in comparison with the price of another good. Are you guys okay with this? What we mean by relative prices? Relative prices is how is it priced compared with something else. You see? So, for example, all of the prices have increased except one didn't increase. So here, this becomes cheaper relative to the others. You see? And if the prices are stable and one item increase, then it becomes more expensive and relative to the others. So that's what we mean by relative prices. Now, relative prices versus average prices, it's possible for individual prices to rise or fall continuously without changing the average price level. And that's when we said tomato increase, yogurt go cheaper, and we're still okay. Ahmed, is everything okay?
Yes.
All right. Relative changes can occur in a period of a stable average prices. So maybe overall price index is the same, but maybe some items increase or some items decrease. Changes in relative prices are market signals, which will help reallocate resources in the economy. So if you notice that fish prices increase, then maybe that's an indicator. You see, maybe there's an unemployment in the fisheries business. Maybe it increased because remember, it's a substitute for maybe chicken. So maybe demand for chicken has increased, or prices of the chicken increased, so more people are requesting fish. So these prices, individual prices, they are signals also for the what's happening in the industry. All right. So any questions so far?